Hello everyone, my name is Robert Woodward. I am going to be your host today. We are doing the forecasting webinar today. It's always a good one. All right, so let's get going. And just as a reminder, we are using the capstone simulation today. If you're in the foundation simulation, your reports are going to look a little different. You're going to have a few differences, but the process of the forecast remains the same. Okay, so the application will be there. All right, so as we get into things, I have a simulation that I am in round 3. Okay, so there's a few years to where I've started to work on a strategy where my competition, a few computer teams, have started to work their strategy as well. Okay, in the early part, there's not a lot of information available that's going to indicate what those teams may do. Okay, so there are going to be some assumptions and a little bit of guesswork, but that's with anything, with any new competitor. You're not going to know exactly what to expect until you have some proof, some results from them. All right, now before we begin, why is forecasting important? Really 2 reasons. One, the forecast number is what your production team will see on the production page. So when they're top line on the production page, they're going to see unit sales forecast. When they see that, that should be an indication of how many units they need to make available through production and through inventory. Okay. Secondly, and this is probably even more important, is that the forecast number establishes your performance. Okay, so for example, if I were to log into my web spreadsheet, and if I were to make a sales forecast, and I'm just going to type in a number here, assume that there were numbers in all of these, for example. If there's zeros, it's going to use a benchmark prediction. We're going to talk about that, but those numbers is what makes up this number. Okay, so without an accurate forecast, your finance team is going to struggle to make sure that everything looks good financially, that they know how much to borrow, how much to possibly offer as dividends, how much things they could retire early, what they could do with their payables and receivables. There's so many things that they can do, but unless they have a good relevant starting point, it's going to be very difficult for them. Okay, so we're going to talk about various methods of developing a forecast. We're going to talk about how to calculate segment demand, how to calculate product demand. We're going to be looking at a few key pieces of information on the Courier report, which is the same as the Fast Track, as well as some information that you can utilize from the Industry Conditions report, which is also going to be useful. Okay, so first off, I am going to go to the high-tech segment. Okay, reason being, I normally would talk traditional, but in this case, my strategy is not to be a major factor there. Okay, so therefore, it's not going to do me much good. Okay, but for this example, first part, you need to know how big the segment demand is. So what you're provided here is last year's demand, which in this case, 3,448, and you're also provided how fast the segment grows. Okay, so to calculate that, you would take your 3,448, which was last year's demand, and you can multiply it by 1 point and then the growth rate, 162. And that's going to give me essentially 4,007 as my sales forecast for the year. Okay, so once you have that number, go ahead and set that aside. And here is where you do the hard part of the process, where you calculate how many units you expect to sell, or to try to figure out what expected market share you would use, which you will then use that 4,007 number, which we just calculated. Okay, now couple ways to come up with a starting point for a forecast. Okay, first off, you're provided every year on your report how much you sold last year. Okay, so for example, I could say, well, I sold 22% last year, maybe I will sell 22% again. So I take 22% times it by that 4,007 number, and that, assuming my market share stays at constant from last year, that could be what I would expect for this year, and I'd put that as a forecast. Okay, now, in some cases, if there were some stockouts in a segment, then I would not want to use my actual market share. And let me look to see if I can find an instance of a good product stocking out. Okay, perfect. One of my products in the size segment, I ended up stocking out. Okay, I sold 874 units for 31% of the market. Okay, however, if you ever see a stock out, look at this chart, the actual versus potential. That's going to indicate if those lines are uneven, that either I sold more than I should have, or I should have sold more. I stocked out. If the red line is higher, that was a stock out. So what I would then do is I would disregard my 31% because that number is pretty irrelevant, and I would go down to my market share report, and I would see that instead I should have got 38.6% of the market. Okay, so I would use 38.6% times by that segment's next year demand, okay, using the same process that we came up with the high-tech segment, and that could be a starting point for my forecast there. Okay, now, another way, and I'm going to give some insight as to why this method could be better than the ones I just mentioned. Okay, one, we understand the weakness of the actual is it just happened to be what did occur, not necessarily what may occur moving forward. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of the potential market share, is what that number provides is simply what occurred over the past 12 months. A lot of times in the simulation, things will change. Okay. In fact, more often than not, they're going to change. If you were selling a product that doesn't do revisions very often, that doesn't change marketing strategy, pricing strategy a lot, then you can kind of follow market trends. Okay, I like to use the example of Oreos. Honestly, they tasted the same, for as far back as I remember them. I don't see significant changes in their price or in the quality of the components that go into the product. Okay, therefore, market trend may be very beneficial, but since we're talking electronics, we're talking about a sensor where the demand is always changing, I would be more interested in how my product is currently sold, meaning maybe how it did yesterday, last month. I'd be a little bit more curious in that than how my product did over the past 12 months. And the market share, actual or potential, doesn't give me a breakdown of when I sold, how much I sold in January versus how much I sold in December. So what you can use for this and what we have provided for you is your December customer survey score. Okay? This is a evaluation of how your product did in December. So it's very recent information. So how to incorporate that number is you add up your survey score numbers. So 77 plus 33 plus 39 plus 39 plus 7. Okay, anything that has a number I'm going to factor in. So I get 195. What I then do is I take my number, 77, divided by the 195, and essentially what that says is in December I got 39.5, so essentially 39.5% of the market. Okay, in which case then I would take my market share, or not my market share, my 2776 number, adding the growth rate, and then I take 39.5%, and that could be, again, my starting point. Okay, a more recent starting point. Okay, now I say starting point because there's more can be done. Okay, now it's not to say you couldn't do well and go with a 39.5%, okay, because it's a good starting point. However, the survey score has no idea what's going to happen on January 1st of next year. Okay, products have the ability to change their price day one of the year. They have the ability to change their promotion strategy, their sales budgets. They can change all those. Okay, products, the ideal spots change. Okay, products can change in MTBF very quickly. So there needs to be more analysis of what may occur in the upcoming year. Okay, so couple places that I always recommend you take a look at on your report. Okay, first off, page 4. This is your production analysis page. This will show you any product that could be new. So for example, you have a Fox product, there's a Doom product, and I have one of mine. So there's 3 new products that are going to come into play. Now there is a difference between the information you see. First off, you see what Fox is. Fox clearly has a high-tech design at this point in time. Hasn't sold yet, so it wasn't something to be factored in yet. However, because it has a past revision date, okay, because we're December 31st and that came out about 3 weeks ago, that product will sell day one of the year. So it could be a significant competitor. So you must factor that product in, try to figure out what % of the market it's going to steal, because it will impact you. Okay. Now, on the other hand, Doom and Arch, you don't know what they are, but you do know when they enter the market, how much they could produce in a full year. So you may not know where they're going, but you can know how much they could produce in the remainder of the year they have left. And you can kind of glean maybe a little bit from how late the revision date in the year as to what the design could be. Okay, and you need to play around a little bit in R&D to know that.